The cold voice echoed through the arena. No one survives the Death Labyrinth. Your time starts now. The gates slammed shut behind Alex Carter. Round him, 12 alien warriors stood ready, sharp claws, glowing eyes, armor from worlds he'd never seen. They looked like predators, but the ground shook and the walls began to move. A high-pitched hiss filled the air. In less than 10 seconds, the first alien screamed, vanishing into a hole. That wasn't there a moment ago. Another was sliced in half by an invisible wall. The crowd watching from outside roared with excitement. Alex didn't move. He just looked around, calm, his eyes scanning the walls. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small piece of white chalk, and smiled. Still the same, he whispered. Just like the mazes back home. The cold voice echoed through the arena, deep and sharp, as if it came from the walls themselves. No one survives the Death Labyrinth. Your time starts now. The sound bounced off the high metal gates as they slammed shut behind Alex Carter. The air inside was heavy, almost as still, like the calm before a storm. Dim blue lights glowed along the ground, showing the huge shapes of the walls that stretched upward until they disappeared into shadows. Around Alex, 12 other challengers stood. They were not from Earth. Tall, strange shapes with skin in different colors, some with bright glowing eyes, some wearing strange armor that shimmered when the light touched it. They looked ready, confident, like they had trained for this their whole lives. Alex stood quietly at the edge. His eyes kept moving, studying everything, while the others focused on the gates in front of them. The floor beneath their feet vibrated softly, almost like the labyrinth was breathing. Then a low hum began, rising slowly, making the air feel warmer. Without warning, the ground shifted. A square piece of floor sank away, opening into a deep, dark pit. One of the challengers had been standing too close and disappeared before anyone could react. Gasps and murmurs spread through the group. The walls themselves started to move, sliding slowly but with a deep, rumbling sound. The glowing symbols carved into them changed patterns, as if giving some kind of message. Alex took one quiet step backward, letting the others move first. He noticed how they rushed toward the center, each trying to find a clear path. The labyrinth seemed to notice too. A soft hiss came from above, and Alex saw something almost invisible sweep down and block one of the passages. Another section of floor tilted slightly, and a heavy stone block dropped into place, sealing another path. The roots were closing one by one. The crowd watching from outside the labyrinth cheered. Their voices came through hidden speakers, distant and echoing. Alex could hear them making bets, shouting in languages he didn't understand. But the tone was clear. They were excited. Most of the challengers began to run, each choosing a different way. Alex stayed still for a moment longer, his head tilted slightly, listening to the sounds the walls made when they moved. He stepped forward slowly, his boots making light taps on the floor. He could hear the faint difference between solid ground and places that seemed hollow. From his pocket, he pulled out a small piece of white chalk. It looked so ordinary, almost laughable compared to the high-tech tools the others carried. He bent down and marked a small symbol on the side of the wall, then another on the ground. He moved quietly, ignoring the noise of running footsteps fading into the distance. Alex had seen places like this before, not exactly like this, but close enough, on Earth. He used to run through old abandoned factories with friends, weaving through collapsed walls and hidden doors. Later, during his training, he had spent hours in man-made mazes, learning how to read small signs, how to use light and sound to tell him where the safe path was. Now, he noticed the labyrinth's design wasn't random. Every wall that moved had a rhythm. Every trap had a tiny sign before it appeared. He could see a faint shimmer on the ground before it shifted, a slight shadow on the wall before it closed. One of the remaining challengers ran past Alex, breathing heavily, heading for what looked like a clear path. Alex didn't say anything, but his eyes flicked to the right. The wall beside that path had just shifted its light pattern. A second later, a section of the floor rose up, blocking the way. The challenger stopped and turned, but Alex was already gone, moving along a narrow side corridor that no one else had noticed. The air here was cooler, and the light softer. The hum of the labyrinth was quieter too, which made the faint sound from above stand out more. It was like a slow breath, almost a low growl, but not quite. Alex looked up but saw only shadows. He marked another symbol on the wall with his chalk. His movements were calm, not rushed. Every step was placed with care, and every corner was checked before he turned. It was as if he wasn't just trying to escape, he was learning the labyrinth, studying it, turning it into a puzzle he could solve. The walls ahead opened into a larger space. A tall stone column stood in the center, with strange markings spiraling upward. The floor here was smooth, without cracks or patterns, which made Alex pause. He tapped his boot lightly. The sound came back softer than before, hollow. He stepped back and tested the floor on the edge solid. That told him where not to walk. Carefully, he moved around the hollow center and approached the far wall. There was a faint line there, like a door, but it didn't open when he touched it. Somewhere far behind him, a sharp echo rang through the corridors. The sound was quick and low, like heavy movement on stone. Alex froze for a moment, listening. The sound came again, closer this time. He glanced up, eyes narrowing slightly. Something else was in the labyrinth, something that wasn't one of the challengers. Alex pressed his hand to the wall and closed his eyes for a second, smiling just a little. Still the same, he whispered under his breath, just like the mazes back home. Then he moved forward, his chalk making another small white mark, and disappeared into the shadows of the next corridor, leaving the faint sound of breathing behind him. The cool air in the narrow corridor carried the faint scent of stone and something older, something that had been here far longer than the labyrinth itself. Alex moved slowly, his steps quiet, his eyes tracing the shifting glow of the symbols on the walls. They were changing again, rearranging into new patterns. Most would see them as decoration, but Alex was watching the rhythm, the way certain shapes appeared just before the walls moved. From somewhere far ahead, he could hear hurried footsteps. One of the alien challengers was moving quickly, too quickly, letting the noise echo off the walls. Alex shook his head slightly. In a place like this, sound was not your friend. He stopped and took the chalk from his pocket again. A small circle on the ground, a line across the wall, marks that only he understood. It was a habit he had picked up years ago in abandoned buildings back on Earth, where finding your way out depended on leaving clues for yourself. The corridor widened, opening into a junction where three paths stretched out in different directions. The air in the left corridor was warmer, the light flickering slightly. That told Alex there was movement there, walls shifting, maybe closing. The right corridor had a faint hum, sharper than the rest of the labyrinth. It reminded him of electrical wires vibrating in old city tunnels. He didn't like that sound. The center path, however, was quiet. Too quiet. That usually meant it was being saved for something important. Alex stepped toward it. As he moved forward, the ground beneath his boots changed texture. The smooth stone gave way to something softer, almost like compressed dust. He tapped it lightly with his foot, solid enough to walk on, but different from the rest. That difference mattered. In places like this, every change meant something ahead. The corridor bent sharply to the left. Just before the turn, Alex stopped. There was a patch of wall where the glow was faint, almost faded. He reached out and pressed it gently. A low click sounded, and the wall shifted just enough to show a hidden space, narrow and dark, but big enough for someone to step into. Alex didn't go inside yet. He knelt, took the chalk, and marked the edge of the wall. Then he listened. The soft, slow breathing he had heard earlier was back, but this time, it was closer. The air seemed to grow heavier as it approached. Alex stepped into the hidden space and pressed himself against the cool stone. The breathing grew louder, then slower. Then it stopped right outside. A shadow moved across the faint light spilling from the corridor. It stayed there for a long moment, silent. Then, just as slowly, it moved on. Alex waited another 10 seconds before stepping out. He knew better than to move too soon. The chalk marks on the wall reassured him he had already begun mapping this place in his own way. Moving deeper into the bend, he found a small raised platform at the end of the corridor. On top was a smooth black panel, covered in symbols that glowed faintly. It was some kind of puzzle lock. Alex ran his fingers over the symbols, feeling the grooves. The shapes reminded him of a number pattern from an old Earth logic game. He began pressing the symbols in a certain order to short lines, then a curve, then a circle. The panel made a soft chime. The wall in front of him slid open a little, showing another path, darker than the last. The air inside was colder, and the sound of the labyrinth's hum was almost gone. This place felt separate, like it wasn't meant to be found by the usual path. The cold shimmer in the air seemed to pulse as Alex stood in front of it. He reached out slowly, his fingers stopping just before touching it. The space felt strange, as if it was bending slightly, almost breathing on its own. Alex didn't step through yet. Instead, he tossed another small object, a metal button, from his jacket pocket into the shimmer. It vanished, but a faint sound came back, like a drop of water falling into a deep well. That told Alex two things. The other side was real, and it wasn't far away. Still, he knew better than to walk in without understanding the pattern. The labyrinth liked to play tricks, and not all paths were what they seemed. He knelt, studying. The floor, the dust near the shimmer, had unusual marks, like smooth curves. They weren't footsteps, not from anything walking on legs. It was as if something had moved here by gliding. The thought made him pause. From far down the corridor behind him, a soft scrape echoed. It was slow, almost careful, as if something didn't want to be heard, but couldn't hide completely. Alex's hand moved to his chalk again. He made another mark on the wall, this one with a tiny arrow pointing toward the shimmer, a silent reminder to himself in case he had to turn back quickly. The scraping sound grew faint, then stopped. The silence after it was deeper than before, like the whole labyrinth was holding its breath. Alex didn't turn around. He knew that sometimes showing you had noticed was more dangerous than pretending you hadn't. He stepped through the shimmer in one smooth motion. For half a second, the air felt thick, like walking through water. Then it was gone. He was in another part of the labyrinth, narrower walls, darker light, and a faint mist curling near the ground. The hum of the labyrinth's moving parts was softer here, but there was another sound barely there, like a low heartbeat in the distance. Alex followed it carefully, his boots making no more noise than a whisper. The mist moved around him in thin streams, hiding small gaps in the floor that could catch the careless. He stopped near a curve in the wall. Just ahead, the mist shifted as if something large was moving through it. A tall shadow slid across the light, its shape uneven, as if made of several parts that moved independently. Alex stayed still, letting his breathing slow. The shadow passed, heading into another passage. Alex waited until it was gone before moving again. He traced the edge of the curve, finding a side path so narrow he had to turn sideways to fit through. The tight passage opened into a small chamber lined with panels that reflected the faint light. In strange ways, the panels were arranged like a maze within the maze, each one showing a slightly different reflection of the room. Alex stepped carefully, testing each surface with his hand. One of the panels rippled under his touch. Like the surface of a pond. He tossed a pebble into it. Instead of bouncing off, it sank through and vanished. Another hidden path. Alex smiled faintly, marking the frame with chalk before stepping in. The space beyond was completely silent. The air was cooler, and the floor was covered with a fine layer of dust, untouched. That meant whatever was hunting in the labyrinth hadn't been here. Yet, he moved forward, noticing the walls now had small symbols etched low near the ground. Almost hidden, they weren't part of the labyrinth's glowing patterns. These looked older, carved by hand. Alex traced one with his finger. It felt like a warning, arrows pointing away from something deeper inside. From far behind, the sound returned, not scraping this time. A soft exhale, slow and deliberate, as if something was close enough to feel the air he moved through. Alex didn't turn around. Instead, he took another careful step forward into the dark, his chalk making one last mark before the shadows swallowed him completely. The air in the deeper corridor was colder than before, almost still, as if the space had been sealed for a long time. Alex let his hand brush lightly against the wall as he moved. The stone here felt different, smoother, as if polished by countless touches. His boots made only the softest sound on the dusty floor. each step measured. The faint glow from the labyrinth's usual markings was missing here. Instead, the light came from thin slits in the ceiling, casting narrow beams across the path. The beams shifted slowly, like moving spotlights, creating pockets of light and shadow. Alex noticed how some beams stayed in place longer than others. That was a clue timing might matter. He paused at a beam that stayed fixed for exactly 4 heartbeats before sliding to the side. Beyond it was a wide chamber. The walls here were covered with tall panels of reflective glass, each tilted at slightly different angles. They didn't show a perfect reflection, each one bent the image, making it stretch, twist, or fade into shadow. Alex stepped inside, his reflection appearing in dozens of places at once. In one panel, he looked taller. In another, shorter. Some reflections didn't move exactly when he did, their motions delayed by half a second. He studied them carefully. Delays meant this wasn't just glass, it was part of the labyrinth's trick. From somewhere outside the chamber came a faint sound. Not the steady breathing from before. This was slower, softer, like someone dragging a hand along the wall. Alex knew it wasn't one of the other challengers. He moved deeper into the room, weaving between the panels. As he passed one, he saw not his own reflection, but a shadow that didn't belong to him. It glided past in the glass. Even though nothing moved in the real space behind him, Alex slowed, keeping his eyes on it without changing his pace. The shadow in the panel stopped, then turned, as if it could see him through the reflection. Alex shifted to his left, using 2 angled panels to create overlapping images. Now the shadow would see not one Alex, but 3, each moving slightly differently. It was an old trick from survival training. Confuse the watcher. Never let it be sure which image is real. The sound outside the chamber grew faint, then silent again. Alex stayed still for a long moment, hidden among the false reflections. Only when he was sure the presence had moved on did he step forward. At the far end of the chamber was a narrow passage blocked by another panel. Unlike the others, this one had a faint pattern etched into the glass, swirls and lines that almost formed a map. Alex traced it with his finger, noticing how the pattern aligned with the positions of the mirrors in the room. It was showing a path, one that avoided certain reflections entirely. He followed it back through the chamber, taking steps only in the safe spaces the map suggested. When he reached the starting point, the panel at the far side gave a soft click, and a hidden door opened in the wall. Beyond it was a tunnel so narrow Alex had to turn sideways to pass through. The air here smelled faintly of metal, and the walls were lined with tiny square holes. A quiet hum filled the space, steady and constant. Halfway through, he stopped. The hum was changing, the tone lowering just slightly. That meant the labyrinth was shifting again. He moved quickly, but carefully until he reached the other end of the tunnel. It opened into a high chamber with a single circular platform in the middle. Around it, the floor was smooth and featureless, as if no one had crossed it in a long time. The platform had markings similar to those near the hidden door patterns that hinted at a sequence. Alex stepped onto it and looked up. Above him, far out of reach, was a faint opening in the ceiling. The markings on the platform might be the way to reach it, but he didn't touch them yet. Somewhere in the shadows, he could feel that slow, steady breathing again. The labyrinth wasn't finished with him, and he wasn't finished with it. Alex stayed still on the platform, his eyes scanning the edges of the high chamber. The breathing was faint, almost blended into the hum of the labyrinth, but it was there, slow, measured, and patient. He didn't look directly toward the sound. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, pretending to examine the markings at his feet. The platform was carved with rings of symbols, each one slightly raised. Some felt warmer to the touch than others. That meant they were connected to the labyrinth's mechanisms. Alex let his fingers hover over them, memorizing the positions without pressing anything. A faint ripple moved through the air to his right. It wasn't a sound or a shadow, just a subtle change in the space itself, like the way heat bends light above a road. Alex knew that meant something or someone was there, moving without footsteps. He turned slowly, stepping off the platform. His movements were unhurried, casual, as though he had lost interest in the markings. The ripple shifted, following him. The floor here was perfectly smooth, which made it ideal for his next idea. From his pocket, he took a small marble, ordinary glass, but polished bright. He dropped it gently. The marble rolled across the floor in a lazy curve, then stopped suddenly, as if hitting something invisible. Alex's eyes narrowed slightly. He marked the spot in his mind, then moved in the opposite direction. If the thing following him was watching that marble, it wouldn't notice him slipping into the darker part of the chamber. Near the far wall, he found a narrow groove running along the base. It was only a few inches deep, but it was enough to hide the chalk marks. He made quickly short lines pointing toward the platform. The breathing grew louder now, as if the presence had stepped closer to the center. Alex could almost picture it examining the marble, trying to understand why it had been placed there. That gave him the time he needed. He circled quietly around the wall until he was behind the platform. From here, he could see the faint shimmer again, like the one he had passed through earlier. This one was smaller, almost hidden between two vertical panels of stone. Before stepping through, Alex bent down and pressed one of the warmer symbols on the platform's edge. There was a soft click, then a distant sound of shifting walls. The shimmer pulsed once. As if reacting, he slipped through it without a sound. The space beyond was dim and narrow, but it had something the rest of the labyrinth didn't: a steady, clean airflow. That meant it connected to somewhere closer to the outside. The tunnel curved gently, and for the first time since entering the labyrinth, Alex could no longer hear the breathing. He wasn't sure if that was good or bad. In places like this, silence often meant the game was about to change. The chalk in his hand felt lighter now, almost worn down from use. He made another mark on the wall, more out of habit than need, and kept walking. The air grew cooler, and ahead he could see a faint glimmer of light that didn't come from the labyrinth's patterns. It was daylight, real daylight, but Alex didn't smile yet. In the Death Labyrinth, nothing was that simple. The faint glimmer ahead grew brighter with every step, but Alex kept his pace slow. In the Death Labyrinth, the closer you thought you were to freedom, the more careful you had to be. He had learned that from the shifting corridors, earlier doors that looked like exits, but looped back to the start. The tunnel floor here was smooth, yet slightly sloped. That slope meant the path was designed to guide someone forward without much effort, almost inviting them to hurry. Alex didn't hurry. He let his fingers trail along the wall, noting how its texture changed from cool stone to something warmer, almost metallic. The light ahead flickered once. That was the first sign something wasn't right. True daylight didn't flicker. When he reached the opening, he stopped just before stepping out. The space beyond was a wide, open courtyard with tall walls, bathed in bright light from above. The air smelled fresher here, almost like the outside world, but there was no sound of wind, no shifting of leaves, nothing natural. Alex crouched and picked up a small pebble. Tossing it into the courtyard, it landed silently, then vanished, the spot swallowing it in a shimmer, just like the traps he had seen before. It wasn't an exit, it was a loop. Step into it, and you'd be placed somewhere else in the labyrinth entirely, probably deeper inside. He studied the walls of the courtyard more closely, near the far side. In the shadow where the walls met, there was a faint vertical seam too, straight to be part of the original structure. Alex's eyes narrowed. That was where the real path had to be. The problem was getting there without triggering the loop in the middle. He traced the edge of the tunnel entrance and found a loose stone. Beneath it was a narrow ledge, just wide enough for a careful step. He tested it with his boot. It held. Balancing his weight, he began to move along the outer edge of the courtyard, keeping close to the wall. The bright light made his shadow stretch unnaturally long, but he ignored it, focusing on his footing. Halfway across, he heard it again, the slow, deliberate breathing. It was coming from behind the seam in the wall. Whatever had been following him all this time was already there, waiting. Alex didn't stop. He reached the seam and pressed both hands against it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, just as the breathing drew closer, the wall slid open a fraction, revealing a narrow passage flooded with real sunlight, the warm, steady kind that didn't flicker. Before stepping through, Alex reached into his pocket and dropped the small marble he had used earlier onto the courtyard floor. As it rolled toward the shimmer in the middle, It caught the light and glinted brightly. The breathing paused, as if whoever or whatever was watching had turned toward it. That was all the time he needed. Alex slipped through the seam, the wall closing silently behind him. The outside air hit him instantly cool, fresh, and alive. With the sound of wind in the trees, he didn't look back. The Death Labyrinth could shift all it wanted now. He was beyond its reach, far in the distance. The crowd's voices erupted in disbelief. No one had expected to see a human walk out. But Alex knew the truth. It hadn't been strength or speed that brought him here. It was simply knowing when not to take the obvious path.